Hello, and welcome back to the True Crime Lounge podcast. This is the YouTube channel to my podcast. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I also have a merch shop that you can go check out as well. Get you those last minute Christmas shopping. I know some of y'all have or waiting till the last minute, but go ahead and get it now. Come on, you all have a true crime lover in your life, right? Or you are a true crime lover, which is why you're watching this. Or you're probably watching this to see why people are so obsessed with cases like this. Either way, go check the shop out. I also have a Patreon that you can join as well. And by joining the Patreon, you'll receive early access to mini-series and season episodes that are scheduled to come out. Since I do work two jobs, I am in school full time. I have to pre-record my episodes, so um, but you will have early access to those by joining if you would like. Um, now I also have can't believe that season 2 is almost over with. That it's been a very fun going out to the west for those episodes. However, let's dive into today's episode here on the TCL, when no ID is required to get in. See what I did there? Yeah, I know, I have a dry sense of humor. Very terrible too, if you might ask. But anyway, today on the TCL podcast, we'll be focusing on a case that I discovered through Lifetime. Oh, I can't remember when this movie came out. I think I was still a teenager when this movie came out. But this movie is called The Blue-Eyed Butcher, and it stars Sarah Paxton as Susan Wright. However, we're going to be discussing the actual case of Susan Wright. Did she have battered wife syndrome, or was she a stone cold hearted murderer? Well, maybe we should get to some information about her, right? Well, let's see. She killed her husband, Jeff Wright, by stabbing him in a knife 193 times. January 13th, 2003. How old was I in 2003? Let's see, maybe 7, because I was born in 96. Yeah. In Houston, Texas. And she would turn herself into authorities just 11 days later, and she will be sentenced to 25 years in prison on March 4th, 2004. And recent is 20 years on November 20th, 2010. I have my opinion about this case, but what do you think? Did he deserve to be killed? Did she suffer from battered wife syndrome? Let me know in the comments what you may think. To begin with, let's dive into a little background, shall we? Well, Susan was born Susan Lucille Ricci on April 24th, 1976 in Houston, Texas, and she would make headlines in 2003 for stabbing her husband, Jeff, 193 times, then burying his body in the backyard and be convicted of first-degree murder in 2004. And she is currently serving her sentence of 20 years in the correctional facility in Gatesville, Texas as of 2012. So at 18 she was working at, it sounded so country when I said that. Anyway, at 18 she was working as a topless dancer at the Gold Cup for 2 months. In 1997, she worked as a waitress in Galveston and where she would meet her husband, Jeff Wright. They were married in 1998 when she was 8.5 months pregnant with their first son, Bradley. A few years later, their son Cody was born. She said that she would go on to say that Jeff began abusing her during the first few years of marriage, and their prosecution would present evidence on January 13th, 2003. When Wright was 26, Jeff was 34. So that's really an age gap thing right there. You guys see? And she attempted to cover up the crime scene by painting the bedroom the next day, and she would file a domestic abuse report to get a restraining order against him to explain his absence. According to the evidence that was introduced in her 2010 punishment, it is shown the prosecution's theory that Jeff was tied to the bed and was not supported by medical that was tied to the bed and was not supported by a medical examiner who excavated his body. The medical examiner would testify that Jeff had a significant amount of cocaine in his body that night. And It was such that his body had yet to metabolize the cocaine, and the cocaine's evidence supported the defense assertion that Jeff was intoxicated that night, and he would come home from boxing class and would punch his son. Jeff had several knife wounds on the hand, forearms, back, and the backs in the back of his legs, indicating defensive wounds consistent with being tied to a bed. On January 18th, she would ask her attorney Neil Davis to come to her home and she would admit to the stabbing of her husband. Davis would contact the Harris County DA's office and inform them of a body being buried under Susan's house. He would also tell them that she was confessed to the crime and she turned herself into authorities at the Harris County Courthouse Friday, January 24th, and she was arraigned on the murder that following Monday. The trial would be 14 months after the arraignment, and February 24, 2004, she would plead not guilty to killing her husband by reason of self-defense. The prosecutor and defense attorney had very different portrayals of her. For example, ADA Kel Siegler depicted her as a scheming wife who seduced him into bed, tied him up, repeatedly stabbed him, and buried him in the backyard in hopes of collecting $200,000 life insurance policy. Wright's attorney, however, would claim that she had suffered years of physical and emotional abuse from her husband. He would also go on to say that she killed him to protect her two younger children. And during the trial, she would testify in her own defense. Now, as most of y'all know, as good as I do, sometimes when you testify, it can either work against you or work for you. Well, she will go on record to emotionally testify that and say, I couldn't stop stabbing him. I couldn't stop. I knew as soon as I stopped, he would be going to get the knife and he would be going to kill me. I didn't want to die. She would testify that on the night of the murder, Wright was on cocaine, being binged once again, and being violent, allegedly beat her. And she would persist that she stabbed her husband in self-defense. Her mom, along with others, would testify in defense, claiming that he witnessed the bruises. The ADA, however, was not impressed by her statements, and she believed that her tears were faked for the jury's benefit. While presenting the case, they presented an unusual demonstration of bringing the Wright's actual bed into the courtroom. Using her co-counsel, the ADA depicted how she believed Wright had tied her husband to the bed and stabbed him to death. During closing arguments, she brought up the jury that Wright had been a topless dancer, and she reiterated that she believed that Wright's emotions were sincere, and that she would contend that Susan Wright was a card-playing, obvious, no doubt about it, caught red-handed, confirmed, and documented liar, whose frequent shows of emotion during the trial were deliberate efforts to influence the jury. Wright's defense never strayed from the claims, however, that Wright stabbed her husband to death to protect her two younger children. The verdict was read on March 3rd, 2004, after only 5.5 hours. And most of the time, y'all know when it's usually a short deliberation, it could go either way, right? Well, the jury convicted her of murder. In a sharp contrast to her emotional testimony during the trial, she showed little reaction to the guilty verdict. The following day, the Wright sentencing, the prosecutors were hoping for at least a 45-year sentence, while Wright's attorneys argued on probation of the client. In the end, the jury met in the middle, sentencing Wright to 25 years in prison. Her appeal in 2014 upheld her conviction. However, in 2008, she reappealed, and this time there was a new witness, Misty McMichael, the wife of former NFL Super Bowl champion Steve McMichael, and ex-fiancé of Jeff Wright, coming forward to show a history of endured abuse and violence during the 4-year relationship with Jeff Wright. And in 2009, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals granted Wright a new sentencing hearing, determining that Wright counsel rendered ineffective assistance during the punishment phase of the trial. In 2004, and on November 20, 2010, she was resentenced to 20 years in prison, 5 years less than her original sentence, barring another appeal. Wright will be eligible for parole on February 28, 2024. Of course, we have to come back and see that she get parole. And she will be 48 years old. Eric Francis will write a book about the case entitled A Wife's Revenge in June 2005. Her trial had been nationally televised on Court TV, and her case was first profiled on Snapped in 2004, 48 Hours in 2005, and an e-special entitled Woman Who Killed, and Deadly Woman episode Lethal Love on ID. Her case is the subject of a 2012 Lifetime original movie, Blue-Eyed Butcher, with Sarah Paxton and Lisa Edelstein. So upon her appeal, she will be resentenced to 20 years in prison. She was convicted of murder of the now infamous stabbing of her husband. But with the jury deliberating only 5.5 hours. Like, his body was partially buried in the backyard in a backyard hole, and he had been digging. Wright had been digging for a fish fund. What do you think? Bad Arrive syndrome so far? Or was she just cold-hearted and wanted to kill her husband? So, let's go into the marriage, shall we? Well, he's characterized as meaning as a charming, gregarious man who had no trouble meeting women. Friends would describe him as someone who liked to have fun, sometimes indulging in drugs, and visit topless clubs, where he would meet Susan in 1997. On a double date that following year, the two would marry, and Susan was 8 months pregnant with their first child. Friends say the marriage seemed to agree with Jeff, and he appeared to be a proud father who enjoyed the stability of a family life. Susan Wright stayed at home to care for Bradley and the couple's second child, daughter Kaylee, while Jeffrey worked as a representative. Now they had a son named Cody. So that's going back and forth right here. But it's also said that her memory was in a bit of a fog. Like, she deposited the body in the backyard of a shallow hole the husband dug to install a fountain. But 5 days after the killing, she told her mother what happened after the family contacted the prestigious Houston law firm DeGuggen, Dixon, and Hennessy. I wonder if that law firm is still active. Imagine that. I wonder if they remember anything about this crime, like the original attorneys. But the courtroom, so they brought the mattress into the courtroom and reenacted the whole scene. Like, yeah. But was it right or wrong? Well, the family of Jeff Wright says they never saw it coming. They consider her like, some say she was a martyr. Well, here was the issues on the appeal. First, there was not a reenactment of a dramatic presentation per se. Second, the demonstration was not intended to recreate the event of the minute detail. Third, the demonstration appears to have been presented in a matter of fact. Fourth, any juror confession related to ligatures was likely alleviated when the trial court instructed the jury that they were not attempting to show the exact location where Jeff. But, like, there was so many issues brought up by this appeal that we just don't know. And this was a very publicized trial, so. But what do y'all think? Did she have Barrett syndrome? Did she just snap and she just couldn't stop? Was she a cold-hearted murderer? Let me know what y'all think. Y'all have a great day, and I will see y'all next time.